We're live.
Good morning, our viewers. My name is Dr. Adityanji, and I am the president of the ICHRRF, International Commission for Human Rights and Religious Freedom. And this is our logo. On behalf of the board of directors and the executive team of the ICHRRF, I invite all of you for our monthly Speaking Up series oration. A little bit about ICHRRF. International Commission for Human Rights and Religious Freedom is a US-based nonprofit focused on upholding human rights and religious freedom through continuous monitoring, policy intervention, and collaboration. We are focused on educational, research, legal, human rights advocacy, and charitable purposes, and strive to be an advocate for human rights and religious freedoms of underrepresented communities across the world. We do believe that humankind can no longer afford to be selectively vocal about rights of only a specific set of people. A humane and just world necessitates fair treatment of all living beings. And our focus is on indigenous rights and freedom, free speech, and their cultural preservation. Some of our initiatives include monitoring violations of the freedoms and sanctity of religious and philosophical minorities across the world. We research into and document cultures, history, challenges faced by such communities. We provide policy recommendations on human rights, religious diversity, and pluralism to international organizations, agencies, national and local governments. We do indulge in collaboration to support the cultural and philosophical diversity across the world. And we have a Professor Ved P. Nanda Memorial Fellowship Training Program in Human Rights and Religious Freedom since January 2022. The topic for today's seminar is the historical significance and persecution of Assyrian Christian nation. Just to be on the record, today is Saturday, August 31st, 2024, and this would be a 1 hour long seminar starting at 11:30 a.m. So a little bit about this particular topic. Assyrian Christian nation is in many ways the most archaic imperial civilization in Western Eurasia that has influenced the language, culture, politics, and religions of all other civilizations of that part of the world. Assyrian ethnicity in Mesopotamia comprises the people that lead the ancient Akkadian, Assyrian, Babylonian, and Chaldean empires, which have deeply impacted the Persian, Hebrew, and by extension, modern-day Western civilization. Soon after the emergence of Christianity, the Assyrian people became enthusiastic converts and pioneers of this new religion in far-flung lands. However, the emergence of Islam after a few centuries led to Assyrians become a highly persecuted people in their own region. Today, they are scattered outside their original homeland, but are gathering to reclaim their ancestral rights. Today's presentation has two speakers from Assyrian diaspora, and their presentation will be followed by question and answer sessions. Just to ground you, this is an old map of Assyrian Empire. So you see how far and wide this Assyrian Empire was. It was certainly not a restricted empire. This is the supposed Assyrian Christian nation in the current cartography. It's not an independent nation as we speak. This is the emblem of the Assyrian nation. And just to let you know, this shows you the Assyrian people Assyrian Christian people, how they lead their lives. So just want to humanize their plight, to see that these are people who have been persecuted in their own land. We have two distinguished speakers, Karmella, Boroshan. Karmella was born in an Assyrian Christian family in Iran, in what was a Christian-dominated city of Urmia that has over hundreds of churches. In the wake of Islamic revolution in Iran in 1979, Karmella left Iran to the US to pursue higher education in biology and clinical science. She obtained her Master's of Science. Her career spans 31 years of management in clinical labs. She is guided by scripture Matthew 25:35-37. She also involved herself in social causes, becoming a voice for Iranian women's rights, as well as helping the people of El Salvador during the civil war there. She now dedicates herself to raising awareness about Assyrian Christian community, especially in Iraq. And our second speaker is Ashuriena Abraham. Ashuriena is also from Assyrian American diaspora, and with a strong background in technology and passion for human rights. She has spent several years volunteering in humanitarian organizations and has been actively involved in Assyrian advocacy for over a year. Her experience in managing technical projects and leading community initiatives has allowed her to make significant contributions to various nonprofit efforts. She promotes justice and dignity, driven by a deep devotion to the truth and a commitment to supporting the resilience and progress of the Assyrian people through strategic application of individual skills and experience by members of the community at large. Before I hand over the platform to our both invited speakers, a few of the housekeeping rules for the audience. Kindly mute yourself to avoid noise interference. Please change your cell phone setting to vibration mode. Please do not interrupt our distinguished speakers. Questions will be taken only after speakers are done with the seminar. All the questions are moderated through the chat function. Please be precise and be brief in your questions. Only those members of the audience who identify themselves on video camera will be allowed to ask questions. No anonymous questioners, please. This event is being recorded and it will be available later on our YouTube channel as well as on our website. And as we focus on human rights of every persecuted minority, every indigenous community, we are honored and privileged to host these speakers who are part of Assyrian Christian diaspora and working towards the religious freedom of this persecuted community in the current day Middle East region. As you know, ICHRRF is a human rights organization. We are not indulging in geopolitics at this point in time, but we will vociferously speak for the rights of any minority that is being persecuted in their indigenous lands just because the demography changed over a period of centuries and the indigenous inhabitants are being persecuted. So as we believe in, plurality, we believe in diversity, we believe in rights of even the tiniest religious minority and its right to freely exercise its own religion. We are with our Assyrian Christian Brotherhood to support their cause, and I invite both our distinguished speakers for this seminar. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aditnaji. I truly appreciate that. And I thank Carl and the ICHRRF to give us this platform to address the plight of this nation that is voiceless and powerless. If you indulge us, I will be viewing the Assyrian history from 10,000 feet very briefly so we can get a feel for who were Assyrians. And then Ashuriena will talk about the current status and situation. As you can see, the next slide that shows the region that we're talking about, that all these activities will be happening. Assyrians. Assyrians are also known as Chaldean or Syriacs, ethnic group indigenous to the Middle East. Most Assyrians speak Semitic, Neo-Aramaic language across many different dialects. They have continuously inhabited Mesopotamia for thousands of years. The Mesopotamia region covers the Middle East, part of Iraq, western part of Iran, southern part of Turkey, and eastern Syria. It is considered a cradle of civilization. Mesopotamia was a fertile crescent and a perfect place for civilization to flourish. Tribes developed in that region, settlements began, cities and towns start developing. And that region was initially known as Sumer. By 3,500 cities of Ur and Uruk rose in southern Mesopotamia, which Ur still exists in southern Iraq. The Assyrians who spoke Akkadian are descendant from Akkadian and Sumerian. They developed their own civilization in the city of Ashur that still exists in northern Iraq. If you look at this map, there's a red star, and I went and saw it this last trip that I made a few months ago. And this gate is the remnant of that city. Mesopotamian empires. The Assyrian kings list records dating from 25th century BC onward. Akkadian empire started by King Sargon around 24th century, which had started with Sumerian, went to Akkadian, and then Babylonian and Assyrians, though they were all same nation. After the fall of Akkadian Empire, the Akkadians split into Assyria in the north and Babylon in the south. Their accomplishments were early writings, establishment of kings, governments, invention of wheels and chariots, invention of plow, expansion of empires, more cities, local kings, gods and goddesses, which developed into religion, and irrigation system was created. As you travel through Iraq, especially in the northern region, we see a lot of these irrigations still left from that era. Akkadian Empire was established by Sargon the Great by 2334 that dominated Mesopotamia by creating a ferocious army. He captured southern Turkey, Iraq, part of Iran. He developed an organized army, standardized weight, measures, and to help the trade. Looking at this map, it shows this light greenish or yellowish greenish area that was part of his empire of Sargon the Great. And the next picture is depicted from the remnants that exist in southern Iraq, that probably this is what it looked like. And there are a lot of pictures that's similar to this. This was the next slide is his ferocious army. And the slide after that are the archaeology remnants in different museums from the Assyrian or Babylonian Empire. Babylonian Empire by 2196, Hammurabi took over the Akkadian Empire. He extended his kingdom from Persian's Gulf to Syria. He was a politician and reigned like a politician, unlike Sargon, who ruled authoritatively. He developed laws to control and protect his territory. He erected tablets, one of which is known as Stele 282 legal verdict, which influenced modern-day legal system in the world. Babylon became known as a political, religious, and cultural center. The next slide, you will see Hammurabi's Stele 282 legal verdict, which is in the Louvre Museum in Paris. Now the Assyrian Empire. By 885 BC, Ashur-Nasirpal became the king in the north. He was determined empire building. At that time, in that region, in the North Mesopotamia, at least 4,000 years, Assyrians were residing according to the historical records. By the end of his kingdom, his territory was expanded from Iraq, Western Iran, Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, all the way to Mediterranean Sea. 704 BC, King Sennacherib besieged Babylon, which, according to the biblical record, that's when Prophet Jonah visits Ninevites. That's when they all believe in one God, monotheism. 669 BC, Ashurbanipal became the king. His kingdom spread from Persia all the way to Egypt. He was most cultured ruler of Assyria. His palace was in Nineveh, where he built the first library. He collected all the tablets written in cuneiform in the temples, had scribes immaculately copy them, and he cataloged 20,000 tablets. And some records shows more than that, but that's the safe number. He was a scholar and a military leader. If you look at the next slide, the map, as Dr. Aditanji showed, that was his empire. And Nineveh is, as you can see, it's written in red, is in the north of Iraq, northwest of Iraq, and it still exists, but there are no more Assyrians there. A few families left. Most tablets that King Ashurbanipal created are in the museums, different part, but most of them reside in the British Museum. Now, the fall of Assyrian Empire. By the 7th century, Assyria was in chaos after Ashurbanipal's death. 627, Nabopolassar ruled over Babylon. Medes sacked the city of Nimrud from north and Babylonians from south. By 612 BC, the coalition of Medes and Babylonians marched against Nineveh, and the Assyrian Empire ended. Babylonian Empire still continues. Nebuchadnezzar II builds the Ishtar Gate, which opened to the ziggurats and temples, and he believed in God of Marduk. The Tower of Babel, which was 650 feet tall, and the Hanging Garden was also built. The Hanging Garden was built for his Persian wife who was sick. Under his kingdom, art, science, and literature considerably flourished. The next slide shows the Gate of Ishtar. On the left side, that was the original gate. But the right side, you can see American soldiers during 2003 American invasion of Iraq. They took a picture in front of the Ishtar Gate, which still exists, and it is in southern part of Iraq. And this is ziggurat that still remains there. Loss of Mesopotamian empires. By 556 BC, Nabonid became a king through a bloody coup. He ignored the matters of his country. He put his son in charge, who abandoned Babylon. By 559 BC, King Cyrus of the Persia attacked Babylon, which ended Babylonian Empire. However, Babylon remained economic center of Persian Empire. Now Assyrians without a country. Aramaic language was a political language that the region kept it as a trade language or political or advocacy language. And they kept their autonomy under Persian, Greek, and Roman Empire. Assyrians became frontline soldiers for the Persian Empire under King Xerxes, playing major role in the Battle of Marathon under King Darius I in 490 BC, Greek and Persian War. The Assyrian army accounted for 3 legions of the Roman army defending the Parthian borders of Persia. Assyria became a Roman province between 116 and 363 AD. The Greeks, Parthians, and Romans had a rather low level of integration with the local population of Mesopotamia, which allowed them to flourish and survive. The Assyrians were Christianized in the 1st to 3rd century in Roman Syria and Roman Assyria, when Apostle Paul and other apostles did their missionary work in that region. At the dawn of Christianity, the people living in Assyria were Assyrians, Medes, Parthians, Persians, Greeks, and Armenians. Assyrian faith as Christians. Assyria continued to exist as a geopolitical entity until the Arab Islam conquest in the 7th century, mid-7th century. The Assyrians initially experienced some religious and cultural freedom. They contributed hugely to Arab Islamic civilization during the Umayyad and Abbasid by translating work of Greek philosophers to Syriac and Arabic. They also excelled in philosophy, science, and theology. The personal physician of the Abbasid Caliphate or caliphs were often Assyrian Christians. The Church of the East was considered one of the major Christian powerhouses in the world, alongside Latin Christianity in Europe and Byzantine Empire. Assyrians were one of the strongest evangelistic forces in the history of Christianity by expanding it all the way to India and China. As you can see, the next slide, the funding churches. There is early Christianity, there's Council of Ephesus, and then Assyrian Church gets established before the Council of Chalcedon. Assyrians were among the first people to convert to Christianity and spread Eastern Christianity to Far East, whereas Latin and Greek Christian cultures became protected by the Romans and Byzantine empires respectively. Assyrian Christianity often found itself marginalized and persecuted. Assyrians became second-class citizens in a greater Arab Islamic state. They were excluded from specific duties and occupations reserved to Muslims, which still happens in some of the Islamic-dominated countries. They did not enjoy the same political rights as Muslims. Their words was not equal to that of a Muslim in the legal and civil matters, and as a Christian, they were subject to a special tax called jizya. They were banned from spreading their religion or building new churches in Muslim-ruled lands, which still is a common practice. From 7th century AD onward, Mesopotamia saw a steady influx of Arabs, with Turkic people arriving as early as 11th century and later slow movement of Kurds and other Iranian people in the 13th century. Assyrian culture, identity, language, and customs were steadily marginalized and gradually became a minority in their own homeland. Conversion to Islam occurred as a result of heavy taxation and violence. The 14th century AD massacre of Timur as Timurid empire expansion devastated the Assyrian people. The Assyrian population has almost been eradicated in many places. Assyrian people still retaining Akkadian infused and influenced Eastern Aramaic and Church of the East Christianity remained in the North Mesopotamia, where what had been Assyria, as late as 14th century. The city of Ashur, as I mentioned, still exists with no Assyrians there, was still populated by Assyrians during the Islamic period until mid-14th century, when the Muslim Turco-Mongol ruler Tamerlane and conducted a religiously motivated massacre of indigenous Assyrians. The Ottomans secured their control over Mesopotamian Syria in the first half of 17th century. Now, non-Muslims were organized into millets under Ottoman Empire: Syriac Christians, Syriac Orthodox, Armenians, Nestorians, Chaldeans, Assyrians, which caused a deep division among these people based on their denomination, which still continues to this day. A religious sectism among the Assyrian took place in the mid-16th century. Church of the East grew until 1552, and then two bishops traveled to Rome, and they entered into the communion with the Catholic Church. But in 1553, one of the bishops, elevated to the rank of patriarch, granted the title of patriarch of the Chaldeans. This church grew in territory, and eventually by 1600, he drifted away from Roman Catholic and became part of entered into the communion with the Church of the East. Archbishop Amid from Turkey, though, reinstated relationship with Rome in 1672 AD, giving birth to modern-day Chaldean Catholic Church. The fate of Assyrian ethnicity and their fate. The Kurdish emirs sought to consolidate their power by attacking Assyrian communities, which were pretty well established in the region. Scholars estimate that tens of thousands of Assyrian in Hakkari region in the southern east of corner of Ottoman Empire were massacred in 1843 by Kurdish warlords. Western powers forced Ottomans to destroy the Kurdish power, which led to more massacres of Assyrians in 1895. Over thousands of Assyrians were massacred in southern East Turkey. Many Assyrians and children were raped, tortured, murdered, and the girls were taken for sex slavery. The Assyrians suffered a number of religiously and ethnically motivated massacres throughout 17th, 18th, and 19th century. A large scale of Hamidian massacres in Turkey, massacres of men, women, children by Muslim Turks and Kurds occurred in the late 19th century by Ottoman Empire army. Starting from 19th century, after the rise of nationalism in the Balkans, the Ottomans started viewing Assyrians and other Christians in their eastern front as a political threat. Another major massacre of Assyrians and Armenians in the Ottoman Empire occurred between 1894 and 1897 by Turkish and Kurdish troops to reassert pan-Islamism. Now I'm going to give the floor to Ashuriena to talk about the 20th century struggles of these communities and this nation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karmella. I wanted to start off by talking about the Mandaeans, who are the true descendants of Babylonians, and what was the ancient Chaldean career within the Babylonian Empire, with faith that revolved around John the Baptist. They practiced rituals of baptism in flowing water, symbolizing purification. And they've faced increasing persecution in Iraq with a drastic decline in their population. 90% of Mandaeans were either killed or fled after the US war in 2003. 60,000 to 70,000 Mandaeans lived in Iraq prior to 2003. Today, only 3,000 to about 6,000 remain in Iraq, with a total population of about 60,000 globally. Mandaeans today are still attacked and killed, often with swords, even outside of their homes. Their land grabbed. They predominantly exist in the southern region of Iraq. Male Islamic extremists have been really attacking and persecuting the Mandaeans with their female counterparts. Often you'll see videos of them clapping and ululating and even throwing candy in celebration of the murder of Mandaeans. And that still happens to this very day. Assyrians in the 20th century, the most significant recent persecution against the Assyrian population was the Assyrian genocide, which occurred during the First World War. Coincided with the Armenian genocide. Ours started in 1914, and an estimated 750,000 Assyrians were slaughtered by the Ottoman Empire and their Kurdish allies, totaling up to about 2/3 of the entire Assyrian population at that time. And this led to a large-scale migration of Turkish-based Assyrian people into countries like Syria, Iran, and Iraq, where they were to suffer further violent assaults at the hands of Arabs and Kurds. In reaction to the Assyrian genocide, and lured by British and Russian promises of an independent nation, Assyrians led by Agha Butros and Malik Khoshaba fought alongside the Allies against the Ottoman forces in an Assyrian war of independence. The Russian allies left the war. The Armenian resistance broke, leaving Assyrians surrounded, isolated, and cut off from line of supply. Assyrian leader Mar-Isha Shimmun asked the League of Nations to recognize the right of Assyrians to govern the area known as the Assyrian Triangle, which encompassed the indigenous Assyrian lands. The Assyrian levies were founded by the British in 1928, and they were prized by the British rulers for their fighting qualities, loyalty, bravery, and discipline. The Assyrian levies played a major role in subduing the pro-Nazi Iraqi forces at the Battle of Hebaniya in 1941. Cooperation between Assyrians and British was viewed with suspicion by the newly formed Kingdom of Iraq. Hundreds of civilians, and actually some estimates are up to 6,000, were massacred during the Semele massacre by the Iraqi army in August 1933. The event led to the expulsion of Mar-Isha Shimmun, the Catholic patriarch of the Church of the East. The period from the 1950s through 1963 saw a really brief period of respite for the Assyrians. The Ba'ath Party then seized power in Iraq February 8, 1963, with the assassination of Abdul Karim Qasim, and also in Syria in 1963, which introduced laws that aimed at suppressing the Assyrian national identity. Forced Arabization towards the indigenous Assyrians, Akkadian names, or even Aramaic versions of biblical names were banned. Assyrian schools, political parties, churches, and literature were repressed. Assyrians were heavily pressured to be identified as Arab Christians. The Anfal campaign of 1986 to 1989 in Iraq was predominantly aimed at Kurds. However, 2,000 Assyrians were murdered through its gas campaigns. Over 31 towns and villages and 25 Assyrian monasteries and churches were razed to the ground. Assyrians that refused to participate in the killing of Kurds were killed, and many were buried alive, including pregnant women and children. Since 2003 Iraq war, social unrest and anarchy have resulted in the unprovoked persecution of Assyrians in Iraq, mostly by Islamic. Sorry?
I would suggest, Carl, please mute Sachi Dastidar.
No, I just did.
Since the 2003 Iraq War, social unrest and anarchy have resulted in the unprovoked persecution of Assyrians in Iraq, mostly by Islamic extremists from both the Shia and Sunni sects of Islam, and by Kurdish nationalists as well. Systematic persecution begins in the Kurdish-controlled region of Iraq after the First Gulf War, and spreads to Baghdad and Basra, intensifying after 2004, with some regions openly declaring genocide on Assyrians. From 2006 to 2008, 7 priests, 3 deacons were murdered, and 5 priests were kidnapped and released with ransom payments and death threats received. Over 60 churches were bombed. Roughly 60 more were attacked since June 2004. Prior to 2003, there was 1.5 million Assyrians in Iraq. Now less than 300,000 remain. From 1995 to 2016, 462 Assyrians were killed by Kurds, Sunnis, Shiites, and Al-Qaeda. This number does not include all the Assyrians that were murdered by ISIS. This is maybe a trigger warning, because the examples are pretty gruesome, but a few of these incidents I included were a 2-month-old infant that was kidnapped, beheaded, roasted, and returned to his family on a bed of rice. A 14-year-old boy was crucified, and a 14-year-old boy was decapitated for being a dirty Christian sinner. But prior to the ISIS coming into Iraq, the KRG forcibly disarmed Assyrians and Yazidis, claiming that they will be protected by the Peshmerga. And then 40 trucks, shortly after this, 40 trucks of ISIS drove into Mosul. And then the Peshmerga, which means those who face death, immediately fled in the middle of the night, abandoning 7 critical posts as ISIS was coming in. The posts were in Nineveh Plains, Nineveh Dam, Sinjar, Mahmur, Mazmur, Daquq, and the left side of the Tigris and Mosul. Shortly following this, the Iraqi army collapses, abandons their positions and weapons to ISIS, and flees also. Assyrians and Yazidis are left to genocide by ISIS. This is the notice of disarmament that was given to Assyrians, and Baghdad, Karmella, and Bartella are in the Nineveh Plains. This was their notice to disarm, saying that if they did not disarm, they would be subject to maximum legal penalties and potentially more. So Assyrians and Yazidis surrendered. Assyrians both in northern Iraq and northeastern Syria are targets of extreme and unprovoked Islamic terrorism by ISIS, also known as Daesh. In 2014, Islamic terrorists of ISIS attacked Assyrian towns and villages in the Assyrian homeland of northern Iraq, together with cities such as Mosul and Kirkuk, which had large Assyrian populations. The atrocities that ISIS committed have been crucifixion, beheading, rape, sex slavery, child murder, forced conversion, robbery, extortion, and ethnic and religious cleansing. Continuous campaigns of genocide reduced the Assyrian population in their indigenous homelands from several millions to hundreds of thousands, as many are massacred and many flee. The KRG's campaign for land annexation intensifies during the ISIS genocide, with a KRG official anonymously telling Reuters in June 2014, "Everyone is worried, but this is a big chance for us. ISIS gave us in 2 weeks what Maliki has not given us in 8 years." Maliki was the former prime minister of Iraq. This is the marking of a Christian home with the letter Nun for Nazarene, the followers of Jesus of Nazareth. And these are some of the destroyed churches in Iraq and Syria. Unfortunately, these are the crucifixion of Assyrians. I'm sorry that these are so graphic. These are the executions of Assyrians by ISIS. That top left picture, the gentleman that's on his knees on the right, was my cousin. Women were forcefully covered and sold into sexual slavery, both Assyrians and Yazidis. Girls as young as 12, some of them as young as 8 and 9 as well. This was a letter where the United Nations verified the existence of the following price list from ISIS on enslaved women in 2015. Women from the age, or girls from the ages of 1 to 50 were sold on the black market, and children were considered the most valuable, being sold at 200,000 dinars. ISIS also went about destroying a lot of Assyrian artifacts, and this is just one picture of it. Even though ISIS was committing genocide, worship and faith still was happening amid the persecution. And these are just some pictures of them worshiping during war. And these are the refugee camps of Assyrians and Yazidis displaced because of ISIS. Our current struggles today are mounting. Assyrians face land grabbing, real estate fraud, lack of support for Assyrian schools, the forced Islamization of minors, lack of security and safety. The ISIS mentality still exists, and many children especially face this in Nineveh Plains. There's loss of seats in parliament by proxy groups and by federal rulings, political discrimination and tokenization of Assyrians. There's lack of infrastructure for Assyrian villages. Assyrian history is appropriated by the local regimes that claim it as their own while denying us indigenous rights. There's archaeological neglect, where a lot of our artifacts are used for military exercises and just left to erosion. Assyrians struggle with obtaining permits for building houses, businesses, or projects. There's discrimination in hiring Assyrians, lack of permission to expand on Assyrian-owned lands, and there's still hate speeches in mosques towards Assyrians and Yazidis. Just a few weeks ago, in the KRG region, Kurdish mullahs in the mosques were calling for a jihad of Yazidis on the 10th anniversary of ISIS, and roughly 25,000 Yazidis fled from the KRG region into the Iraqi central government regions, some of them even to Sinjar. There's also checkpoints that restrict movement on Assyrian villages. It restricts access to basic necessities and medical care during curfews, leaving Assyrians vulnerable to terrorism and consequences of Turkish and PKK war. We see this a lot with the region of Nala. A few months ago, a woman who has an illness went to the hospital with her family and was denied entrance back into her home by the checkpoints. Her and her family had to sleep on the side of the road until the curfew was lifted in the morning so she could return back home. Right now, there's a water crisis in Ankawa worsening. There's already a limited supply of water because of water shortages, and whatever water is remaining is diverted to irrigate grass on a golf course instead of providing it for residents, exacerbating the issue. Some residents have had no access to water for over 30 days, and they're forced to buy water in order to survive. But some people don't have that kind of money to be able to buy that much water. So it's a terrible issue right now, and a lot of the Assyrian humanitarian organizations with funds raised in diaspora are working on helping people, but it's a very challenging thing to handle when it's coming from a humanitarian organization, because it lacks a lot of manpower and the financial capability to take care of everyone. Right now, the Kurdish-led administration in Syria has released over 140 ISIS prisoners also back into society, which is deeply troubling, as there are still Assyrians remaining in Hasakeh, the Kurdish-controlled region in Syria. Also, the Camp al-Hol in Deir ez-Zor, Syria, holds about 15,000 ISIS members. It's being relocated to Camp Jeddah in Mosul, where Peshmerga was promised to be responsible over that camp, but there isn't a lot of faith in that happening, as Peshmerga had been the initial group of people who had fled when ISIS first entered Mosul. Right now, there's also a KRG registered Kurdish neo-Nazi organization called HELPA, based in Erbil in Iraq, whose charter explicitly calls for the genocide of Assyrians and Turkmen. It's based in Erbil, and it has a known membership of 1,000 individuals, and there's potentially additional undisclosed number of secret members. They are known to have met the Erbil governor, and they are fairly active in the region. This is just the Wikipedia on them, actually, saying that HELPA has undertaken a campaign to promote their belief that Arabs should be expelled from the Kurdistan region, while Turkmen and Assyrians, Chaldeans, Arameans, Syriacs should be genocided. They had posted this on their website. They had taken it down, but through Internet Archives, you can still find the statement calling for our genocide. Where are the Assyrians? Today, the largest Assyrian diaspora communities are found in the US. There's roughly about 500,000 Assyrians in the United States. In Jordan, there's about 30,000 to 150,000. A lot of those are refugees fleeing that have fled, Iraq and Syria. Sweden has about 150,000. Germany has 70 to 100,000, and Australia has about 60,000. Australia has a growing community now. Part of our resilience is the Assyrian schools that Assyrian Aid Society of Iraq funds with funds raised in diaspora. All the curriculums are in Assyrian in northern Iraq from 1st to 12th grade. They also pay for the teachers' salaries. They build and repair infrastructure because the government doesn't do this. They put up streetlights. They rehabilitated houses that were destroyed by ISIS. They create irrigation channels, businesses. They have a mobile clinic. Their mobile medical clinic goes around and it supports any community, whether they're Assyrian, Yazidi, Kurds, Arabs, Turkmens. Anybody that goes there will get free healthcare and pharmaceutical needs. It'll meet their pharmaceutical needs. We also have agricultural support through the Assyrian Aid Society of Iraq, and they have microloan programs that help restart businesses. How to revive Assyrians, this ancient indigenous Christian people. The Nineveh Governorate Protection Zone would be an excellent way to do this. Autonomy would be very, very helpful to preserve the Assyrians in their indigenous homelands, and self-administration of Assyrians living under the Iraqi central government and the Kurdish regional government, and the implementation of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, which Iraq has signed, but has claimed that no indigenous people exists in Iraq, which is not true. Assyrians, Mandayans, Yazidis exist in Iraq. A reinstatement of the quota seats without external interference. Earlier this year, the Iraqi central government removed the 5 quota seats in the Kurdish regional government due to a political power play between the KDP and the PUK in the KRG region. They reinstated 3 of them, but there still is external interference by proxy groups. This exists also in the Iraqi central government, where our 5 quota seats there are also taken by proxy groups. And we're hoping for an employment of metrics to monitor all of these being implemented in order to secure and create safety for Assyrians in Iraq. These are a few of the references that we used for this presentation, and I'd like to hand it back over to Karmella if she wanted to add anything on this. Karmella?
Karmella,
Hear
you're
me?
muted.
Karmella, unmute yourself.
Yeah, I just did. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. I hope the audience are not bored with the amount of information, but we are working with many representatives to have a resolution, but resolution basically is FYI for Congress. We're trying to create a bill or an act that need to be, if America does not do something right now, this nation's completely is done. There is major immigration, people are immigrating out of Iraq due to a lot of, we call it subtle ethnic cleansing that is going on right now. So if you guys have any questions, we're open for questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Karmella and Ashuriena,
Thank you.
for educating us, educating the human rights community about very serious violations of human rights, restrictions of religious freedom, forced conversions, sexual slavery, and a slow, ongoing process of ethnic cleansing and what has been called drip genocide of this indigenous community in their indigenous homeland. We are giving you this platform so that the voice of the voiceless is brought to the deaf. You know, we want your voice to be amplified, we want your voice to be heard. And this may be your first presentation on our platform, but I can assure you we will continue to work with both of you as well as your community in your just struggle for cultural preservation of your philosophical and religious belief system, your indigenous way of living in the region that you came from originally. The easiest way when any kind of genocide or persecution happens is to flee abroad, because saving lives is very important. But I think at this point in time, there's a need to demand right to return for Assyrian Christian communities from wherever they were forced to flee back to their homeland, and giving some sort of autonomy and land rights. We will work with you. We will invite you for our second annual Forgotten Genocide Conference on September 23rd at George Mason University. And should you be able to come, we will give you a 20-minute slot to make this presentation in a brief manner, because it will be a larger conference. So on behalf of the ICHRRF, we sympathize with your cause and we'll work with you in future as well. There are some questions from our executive director. He has sent a list of 5 questions. Just for the sake of brevity, we'll not go into all those questions, but the most pertinent one, from the point of view of restoration and ethnic preservation of this vastly genocided community. So you have mentioned that United States has to kind of get it right together, especially because the genocide or the ethnic cleansing that happened post US intervention in Iraq is US responsibility. There's a pottery barn rule. If you touch it, you break it, you own it. The United States government owes to itself to restore the status quo ante of Assyrian Christians in Iraq, from where they have been persecuted, prosecuted, and expelled following the 2003 invasion of Iraq by the United States. It is a responsibility of the US government. One question from Mr. Clemens, which I will read out. Why would a small spiritual sect like Assyrian Christian be persecuted by Islam? You don't pose any threat to them. Why it is happening? Are there political reasons, or it's just simple hatred of anything else?
That's a very good question. It has 2 sides to it. One, the hatred toward other beliefs still exists. You're either with me or I'm going to kill you. That's the mentality that unfortunately exists in a lot of places in the world. Christians and Baha'is, Jewish people, these are people that unfortunately in Iran and in other places where Islamic, how do I say it, ultra-right or these ultra-right or fanatic Muslims use that as a tool to kill these people or get them out of that region. That's the mentality that they have. Like in Iran, they did not tolerate Baha'is at all. They do not tolerate Jewish people, but they are tolerating us, even though the laws are against us. The other piece is KRG, or Kurdistan Regional Government. They want their own country. And in order to own their own country, they are showing a different face to the Western world, specifically to America. That Assyrian history was ours. Ashur was Kurds. Medes were Kurds. The Iranian government, the initial government of Iran, which was Archaic dynasty, it was Kurds. So that way, when you put your hands into the history and start changing the history and start changing the facts, you are creating this image that we are very strong and we need our country. Assyrians, because they are Christians, they marry one wife and they have 2 to 4 children max. Among the people like Arabs or Kurdish people, because their faith allows them to marry more than one wife, each wife brings 4 or 5 children, they increase in number in a very alarming rate, to the point that one of the Assyrians that was in parliament many years ago, he said, where are the resources to feed these young children? Where is the future of Iraq going? So, like I said, there's two pronged. One of them, we are a thorn on the side of the KRG because we are voicing our concerns, and they want to say, oh, Assyrians don't get along, they don't know what their name is. So they print a very bad picture of us in order to be able to enforce their territory and take over our archaeologies, our history. Even one of the King Sennacherib's aqueduct, if you see it, it's extremely impressive in northern Iraq. They went and painted their own flag over it, that this was Kurdish archaeology. And that's how they mar these archaeologies that go back 3,000, 4,000 years ago. I hope I answered the question. One is the philosophy that you believe, the doctrine you believe, and also what you want for your future.
As an organization that believes in plurality and polycentricity, ICHRRF stands with you for your right to exist, for your right to propagate your spiritual and philosophical belief system, and for right to have your indigenous way of living.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. That's very noble.
And as I said, this would not be the last time we will be having this conversation. We are deeply, deeply committed to plurality, diversity, polycentricity, and preservation of indigenous communities. We are the voice of the voiceless. In that sense, we are going to give you a helping hand. And as I said, you do have an invitation from us to participate in our second annual Forgotten Genocide Conference. If either of you can make to that conference, we will give you a slot for speaking. You are already very well prepared. So we would actually amplify your voice on a major platform.
Thank you.
I don't want to extend this seminar because time is running short, but we are very thankful that at a short notice, you gathered all the material and made this presentation. But believe it or not, you do have friends who will support your cause and who will just support your right to exist. We cannot have a situation when just a small minority can be ethnically cleansed and eliminated from this planet of ours. Everyone has a right to exist, including Assyrian Christian nation. And again, thank you very much indeed. Your story is heart-wrenching. We feel the pain, and you are our brothers and sisters. So we are with you.
Thank you so much. We are so honored to know you guys, and thank you so much for extending the arm of friendship, and we would love to collaborate. If you can send us the information about the September 23rd, we will get back to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed. I will also thank our audience members on a Saturday morning, took an hour off to attend this conference. The proceedings of this seminar have been recorded on our YouTube channel. It will be available on our website within the next 24 hours. So it will be available as an educational resource forever for the rest of the international community. Thank you very much indeed, and we shall stay in touch with you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.